Hey, everybody. Glad you're here tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. So, yeah, let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So, yeah, I was going to do this stream last night, but there was obviously some breaking news, and I didn't get to that. And I'll be talking about that here in a little bit. But we're here tonight, and I'm glad we're here. So, yeah, let's do this once again. Trying to get back in the habit of making this an every night thing. This is our regular time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So glad you're here. Yeah, we're going to follow our usual format. Questions can be sent via Rumble Rants on the Rumble. We do have a new Rumble link, by the way, if you are wanting to get on the Rumble. I know a lot of you want to get on the Rumble. We do have a new Rumble link, the one that was originally done last night. I guess it expired or whatnot, so we're doing it on this Rumble link. You can send questions via Rumble Rants, or you can send them on Cash App. You can Cash App me at CalebMoppin22. Always a great way to send questions. It is the second half of the show that is all you guys. You guys ask me questions, I answer them, and that's the way we do things. And so if you'd like your questions answered, send me something to talk about in the second half of the program. As far as announcements, the Center for Political Innovation is doing some great stuff. We've got some exciting activities coming up. We're going to be doing some important outreach at the end of August. I'm not ready to talk about that, but we'll probably have an update on that shortly. In addition to that, we are paying attention to a lot of global situations. We just published an important article about the crisis in Angola on our website, and take a look at that. I will probably stream about that issue tomorrow night, but Angola, the African nation, is in the middle of an uprising against fuel price hikes, so check out that article. We're figuring out what we can do around that issue as well. And all kinds of exciting things are in the works. We are still publishing the video. I've been editing every day, bit by bit, video from the Center for Political Innovation National Convention that just happened in Chicago. Plenty more video to edit. We got Jeff Young from Kentucky, his speech, Keith Preston's speech, the great David Fox, his speech. A lot still remains to be edited from the convention. So gradually that's coming out. And just keep an eye on us. We need new members. So if you'd like to join the Center for Political Innovation, you can join on our website. It's $15 a month, and your first month is free. So feel free to become a member of the Center for Political Innovation. So as I said before, we are following our usual format. Questions can be sent via Rumble Rants on Rumble, or you can Cash App me at CalebMoppin22. I'm enjoying the summer heat. It is the heat of the summer here in New York City, and that's great. And we are here and just getting back into the regular swing of regular streams. Some people have suggested that I start doing this on Kick. I have not used the Kick app before. I've done Rumble. I've done YouTube for years. I mean, I go back to 2008. I've been doing YouTube. Some people have suggested that rather than streaming this on Facebook, which I've been doing, that's the third platform, that rather I make the third platform Kick. I'm open to that. Not decided that that's what I want to do, but we'll see. We're always just pursuing different ideas and different options. So that's how we're doing things. If you got a question for the second half of the show, send me a Rumble rant or you can super chat me. You can Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App. Can't super chat directly through YouTube because we're demonetized, which is obnoxious, but that's where we're at. So yeah, I guess I'll just jump into it. So why was it that I didn't stream last night? Well, there was a shooting in Manhattan, and I had to rush to the scene of the shooting to cover it. So I was getting towards sunset, but the shooting happened. And so I got in a taxi and I rushed to Manhattan to cover the shooting. And here is what we saw.
At this point, we have confirmation that 2 law enforcement officers were indeed hit by bullets, and one of those law enforcement officers has died from his injuries. Now, there were apparently a number of people on the scene. As many as 6 people may have been hit by bullets. We now have confirmation that one of the law enforcement officers on the scene has died from gunshot wounds inflicted by the shooter. Now, there is a video of this shooter entering the building, security video showing him entering the Blackstone building, carrying his AR-15 rifle. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, and from what we understand, that shooter is now dead. The FBI is on the scene. We're hearing police helicopters above. There's all kinds of law enforcement vehicles. The actual street where the incident took place is blocked off. We're here pretty close to the police line. This is about as far as you can get. There's caution tape blocking us from getting any further. And at this point, we can confirm that there is one law enforcement officer who has lost their life as a result of the shooting incident in Midtown Manhattan at the Blackstone building, Park Avenue and 51st Street.
Yeah. So, 4 people ended up dead. One of them was a law enforcement officer who was a Muslim, actually, a man of Bangladeshi descent who'd become a police officer. Very sad story. He had a pregnant wife. It's very, very sad. I think what's even more interesting, I guess. So first of all, we were there last night. We didn't really know what was happening. We knew there was a shooter in the building. We knew that he'd been seen going into the building with his AR-15 rifle. We knew that he, eventually he died. We heard first that it was 1 law enforcement officer had been hit. Then it was 2 law enforcement officers that had been hit. And then, one of the law enforcement officers died. 3 other people died. Yes, including the new CEO of Blackstone, a woman CEO of the Blackstone Corporation. Now, what's interesting is while this was happening, there was a swirl of disinformation. And that is probably the most important thing to remember about this case. It was all over social media that this was done by a pro-Palestine activist. And that was bullshit. It had nothing to do with that. The shooter was a former football player. And he was apparently trying to go to the NFL office. He had suffered a head injury and was having mental health issues. And he blamed the National Football League for this. And he wanted to take revenge on the NFL. He even had a suicide note in his back pocket saying that he wanted to take revenge on the National Football League. However, when I was in front of the building, no one knew that that was the case. And it was all over social media that this was done by pro-Palestine activists. It's really wild. It's really, really crazy.
Out of conflicting information about the shooter. There's allegations all across social media that the individual shouted "Free Palestine." However, others are saying that that didn't happen, and it's not clear if there was a stated motivation. Now, what is clear is there were a couple individuals who were arrested on the scene wearing Free Palestine shirts. However, many reports indicate, and some of the eyewitnesses I spoke to indicate that they may have had nothing to do with the incident. They were simply in the area Free Palestine shirts. However, those individuals who were arrested, their faces are all across social media. It's not clear. There is conflicting information. Many people on the scene are saying they heard nothing related to Palestine or any other motivation on the scene. Others are saying that such things were heard. It's not clear. Social media has conflicting narratives, and people on the scene also have conflicting accounts of what took place. As of yet, there is no confirmation of any motivation on the part of the shooter.
It had nothing to do with Palestine. Absolutely nothing to do with Palestine. It was a pissed off ex-football player going after the NFL. And yet it was all over social media. Laura Loomer tweeted out that the shooter was doing it to free Palestine and that he was a Mamdani supporter and this is Muslim terrorism in your city. And there were all these people tweeting out that this was done by pro-Palestine activists. And where is the apology, right? It wasn't. They were lying. Laura Loomer was lying. It was just a lie. And these Zionists are just fine with that. It wasn't actually, it had nothing to do with Palestine. It was a former football player. And all these people were tweeting out that it was a pro-Palestine activist blaming Mamdani. And in fact, the police officer who died was a Muslim. It wasn't a Muslim who did this. It was a police officer. The police officer who died on the scene trying to protect people was a Muslim himself. Where's the apology? The Zionists are just nasty liars. I've never seen anything like this. It's like, a terrorist attack happens. You blame it on one group of people. And then afterwards, they don't delete their tweets even. They leave their tweets up. No shame whatsoever. This isn't all Zionists. There are some Zionists that are, pro-Israel that are a little bit smarter than that. This is that right-wing layer. This is the Pamela Geller crowd. This is that, lower level real estate Zionist crowd that, that live in that area, right? 51st Street. This is, Midtown Manhattan. This is, getting up in the 50s, close to Central Park. It's those Zionists that live around there. They have absolutely no shame. I remember a few years back, it was actually a little while ago. It was maybe 11 years ago, 12 years ago when I first moved to New York City. There was an Orthodox Jewish child that was abducted and disappeared, and the community was mobilizing to find him, and they eventually found him, and he'd been abducted by another Orthodox Jew, an Orthodox Jewish guy who was a child molester. And the guy was arrested, and the child had been murdered, and the guy was arrested. And Dov Heikind, who is a local Zionist extremist, former member of the Jewish Defense League, literally said on TV, "I wish an Arab had killed this child." Wow. Those are the words he said. He said on live television, "I wish an Arab had killed this child." How can you talk that way? Right? It's just blatant hate. And here we have Laura Loomer and all these people tweeting out that the shooter was doing it and shouting free Palestine, was doing it as a Palestine activist. We turn out it has nothing to do with that. And in fact, the police officer who lost his life trying to stop this mass shooter was a Muslim. If anything, they should have been tweeting, "Great, Muslims protecting our city." And these are the Blue Lives Matter people, right? These are the people that, during the protests and all of that, they loved the police. Well, why are they not sticking up for this Muslim police officer who gave his life to save people from a mass shooter, right? Why? In fact, they were trying to blame people who agree with him and people who share the Islamic beliefs of this Muslim police officer. They're trying to blame them for the shooting. The very same people that say Blue Lives Matter, here you have a blue life, a Muslim police officer dies trying to stop a shooter, and they not only do they not highlight that, but they lie and claim the shooter is a Palestine activist when he's not. It's particularly egregious the way these folks behaved. What's also wild is apparently there were a couple people in the area where the shooting was happening who were just walking by wearing Free Palestine shirts, and they were arrested. And their faces were blasted all over social media, claiming that they had something to do with it. Apparently, one pro-Palestine activist was arrested, and he said, "I'm not the active shooter. I have nothing to do with this." And they took pictures of him and say, "Wow, that's why." And a couple people who just happened to be in the area and were wearing pro-Palestine shirts were arrested. That was the basis on, so I guess if there's a terrorist attack happening, anyone wearing a pro-Palestine shirt is subject to arrest, even if the terrorist attack has nothing to do with Palestine. That's particularly outrageous. There was a woman on the scene. She was pretty upset, but I briefly got her, reaction to this because she, I guess she knew one of the people who'd been arrested for wearing a pro-Palestine shirt.
Right. like they're putting their pictures all over the news and saying that they are part of this. And they're saying that Palestine was involved, Sophia was involved. That's also a lie. Okay. I saw, but like, how come you're not interested in the 2 arrests they made, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, this woman apparently was quite upset because they had just grabbed people that were wearing pro-Palestine gear, and because they were in the vicinity of a shooting incident, they assumed they were part of it. And then it got blasted; their faces got blasted all over the media, saying that they had something to do with it when they didn't. That's particularly crazy. And I know that David Fox was in there talking about years of lead. What's wild is this incident apparently had nothing to do with, years of lead. This was a former football player who was angry at the NFL, had suffered very serious head injuries, and I guess he blamed the NFL or a former NFL player who had. It's a very unclear. I guess his suicide note said, the NFL made me drink antifreeze or something. It was very, very odd. Very, very, very odd. But it had nothing to do with that. But immediately, social media made it about something that was completely unrelated. That is very, very dangerous. And that goes, when we talk about years of lead, right? This is an incident, a horrific incident where somebody apparently, obviously the guy had serious head injuries. He had a grievance against the National Football League, whatever. It's a really sad situation. And he put on a bulletproof vest. He got his AR-15 rifle. He went into this building and he killed 4 people. He shot, I guess, maybe 6 people were injured, were injured by his bullets or whatever, shot in the back. He was just shooting people in the back in this very cowardly way. And he eventually killed himself once he was surrounded. Then he just shot himself, but it had nothing to do with politics, but they made it about politics and they tried to blame the pro-Palestine movement on it. And that is very disturbing. Now, another thing, though, and Kinkle pointed this out, and I don't even know what to make of this. In addition to the Bangladeshi police officer who died, we understand that one of the victims was the CEO of Blackstone, which is the corporation that owns the building. Now, I guess that makes sense. It was the Blackstone building. There were many different companies and people headquartered there, including the NFL. Apparently, the guy got into the wrong elevator. He was trying to get to the NFL headquarters, but he got into the wrong elevator with his gun, and so he was kind of lost in the building. But what's interesting is apparently one of the victims was the CEO of this investment company, this investing firm. Now, what are the chances that, New York City is a big city and this building is a huge building, right? It's owned by Blackstone, the investment company, but what are the chances that of all, 4 people die, one of whom is a police officer, and among the other 3 people just happens to be the head honcho, the head CEO of the company? That is extremely odd, extremely odd. And people are pointing out this happened just a couple blocks away from where Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, got killed, allegedly by Luigi Mangione. And so the internet is going wild with conspiracy theories now. And people are saying, what are the chances that the CEO of the company just happens to get hit, right? Totally random, right? And, of all the people in the building, that's very, very suspicious. And then they blamed it on Palestine, had nothing to do with Palestine. And then I guess it was about the NFL, but this guy, I guess, he got in the wrong elevator. You'd think the guy would, if he was going to, do a mass shooting and go out in a blaze of glory, you'd think he'd get the right elevator or something. I agree, Funky. Something smells fishy. Something about this whole situation is weird. It's weird and doesn't make sense. And they tried to blame it on Palestine, and then they didn't. And the CEO of the company just happens to be one of the victims, and he was supposedly targeting the NFL. because he had head injuries, but yet he wasn't in the right elevator. Something's off. Now, the other thing that people are mad about, I'll throw this out there, is that the shooter was African American, and it was all over the media. The picture of him went out, and they said he appears to be white. And a lot of people looked at the picture and said, no, he doesn't appear to be white. He was a black man. And so there's a lot of anger, and they're saying, oh, the newscasters couldn't say he was a black man. They were being politically correct. So they blamed white people for something that was done by a black man. I'm sorry, get over it. That's just, we got other shit to worry about. Okay. I looked at the picture. I didn't know what ethnicity the guy was. If some newscaster said he appears to be white and he didn't, I mean, in the spur of the moment, somebody looked at a picture and who cares? Get over it. I'm sorry. That's dumb. The race of the guy is obviously not the issue. It might have been if he was an Islamic extremist or something like that. He clearly was not. It had nothing to do with Palestine and Gaza. So who cares? And I mean, okay, so some newscaster said he appears to be white. He wasn't white. All right, great. All right. Is that's what you're mad about? They literally blamed a political movement that had nothing to do with it. But you're mad that they said he appears to be white when he didn't. Right? I mean, yeah, exactly. If he's black, he's black. Moving on. Like, who cares? Right? And that's, Vivek Ramaswamy and all these people are like, oh my God, they blamed white people to be politically correct. Oh, blah, 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 blah. It's like, grow up, please. That's dumb. But yeah, I was there. I was on the scene. It was hot, and there were a lot of people outside and a lot of police on the scene, anti-terrorism task force and FBI and all kinds of people on the scene. And that's where I was. And that's why I didn't stream for you all last night. I was supposed to stream for you all, but at sunset, I was out in front of, I was out in front of the building, and I was reporting on this incident. Again, something smells fishy about the whole thing. Everything sounds completely fishy from beginning to end. But at the end of the day, I don't care. I mean, it is what it is. One thing that I did point out, which is, oh, this is interesting. He got into the wrong elevator because it was badge protected, and the woman came down, and he got into that elevator, according to news reports. Okay, well, again, this guy was planning to take his own life and go out in a blaze of glory. You think he could have planned it? I don't know. The other thing, though, that's worth pointing it out, and I did point this out in some of my reporting, is that Manhattan has the strictest gun control laws of anybody. I mean, there is no corner of this country, I think, that has stricter gun control laws. Maybe Washington, D.C., but that's about it. You cannot have a gun in New York City, right? If you have a gun and you are not a police officer or an armed security guard, they see you with the gun, they jump on you, and you go to jail for like 5 years, right? There's no accidents. It's not a matter of, oh, I didn't realize this was the no gun zone. No, if you bring a gun into Manhattan, ooh, you're in huge trouble. So this guy, he didn't have a little tiny gun he hid in his shirt. He wasn't wearing a big trench coat. This guy had, you've seen the picture. This guy was walking around, right? This guy was walking around with a huge gun drawn, right? I'll put the picture on the screen. So that raises some questions, right? This guy, I don't know how he came. Did he come in a subway? Or, you cannot walk around New York City with a gun, right? You just can't, unless you're an armed security guard. Some of the strictest gun control legislation in the world. New York City, it is like, you just cannot even think about having a gun here. So this is how the guy walked into the building. He walked in with this huge AR-15 rifle, and he's walking around on the street with an AR. Nobody said, wait a second, you can't do that. and with all the police, and I mean, and he's on 51st Street and Park Avenue, and he's walking around like that, and nobody stopped him, and nobody, I mean, and it's like, I mean, first of all, it says to me that gun control laws are pretty useless. But second of all, it also raises the question of, like, again, something fishy is going on here. This guy is walking around with that, and nobody says anything, and no one's like, wait a second, hold up, what are you doing? That no police officers ran over to him and checked his licensing and what? Really? Something's off. Something's off about the whole thing. I mean, I have a feeling that if I was walking around with one of those, I would be jumped in 2 seconds. So why was this guy walking around with one of those and was able to just walk into the building, get in the elevator? I mean, yeah, there you go. So a lot about the case doesn't really add up. And that's, I mean, there's not much more I can say about it. I always tell people to be careful, in the conspiracy stuff, right? I know that the government lies about a lot of things. Conspiracies do take place, but you always got to be careful, because the way you can be discredited is if you start talking about what did happen without sufficient evidence. And that's what I see a lot of, right? People start talking about what actually happened rather than just poking holes in the official story or asking questions about the official story. I mean, I just gave you the official story. It's viable. It's very possible. I mean, this guy apparently does have a record, former NFL player. NFL headquarters were in the building. I mean, there are a lot of very, very hateful Zionists who would blame this on Palestine, even though it had nothing to do with it. And they did apparently just arrest some Palestine people who happened to be in the area. That's pretty awful. So, I mean, the official story seems viable. There's some things that are a little fishy about it, especially the whole thing of he killed the CEO. That is like, how does that happen? Of all the chances, he happens to kill the CEO of the company. That's pretty weird. But other than that, that's all we know. And if I start hearing saying, oh, well, this was the Illuminati and blah, 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 and that's where people stop listening to you and you lose your credibility. So I warn people, don't start talking about things you don't know. Just point to what we do know and what seems a little bit off about it. And who knows? This was a weird one. This was definitely a weird one. I think the whole city kind of doesn't even know what to think of it. It was very, very strange, but hey, we lost a police officer. We lost a CEO just blocks away from, blocks away. I mean, there we go. All right. So now I got a couple other things I wanted to share with you all. If you have any questions for me for the second half of the show, send some Rumble rants. I see one Rumble rant has already come in from Leo Messi. Much appreciated. Rumble rants or cash at me at CalebMoppin22. Happy to answer your questions anytime. Always appreciated. Always appreciated. But I got a couple other items to talk about, and then I will finish this book tonight. Last night, or the last time, Sunday night, I read well over half of this book. It's not a very long book. So I will finish this book tonight. So there we go. So the next thing I wanted to talk about on here was, China. There is a lot of people that if you say that China is a socialist country, they roll their eyes and are like, that's dumb. They call themselves that, but everybody knows they're not. And if you point to China's economic successes, they say, well, that's only because they're capitalist, Caleb. Everybody knows that China is capitalist. Duh, you're stupid. You think China being economically successful is an argument for socialism? That's retarded. You must be an idiot, right? I mean, we've all heard this, right? When, the very same people will tell you that Obamacare is communism, will tell you the post office is communism, but somehow China, where the government owns 50% of the industries, 50% state ownership of industry, where even the private companies are not free to do what they want. They have to obey the Chinese Communist Party, and they have no property rights, and they're told what to do and how they can make money. They do make money. They do operate, I guess, in a market way, but they don't have any total freedom. Where there is a 5-year economic plan in which the government sits down and says, we want growth in these sectors and we want our economy to expand. Somehow, though, that's proof that the free market is always the answer. I mean, it's absolutely infuriating, right? And I mean, China, yes, they have had market reforms. Yes, there is a big market sector, and there's a lot of people in China. There's many millionaires and billionaires in China. But at the same time, it's not a country where profits are in command. They have a centrally planned economy. The banks, factories, and industries are centrally planned and controlled by the Communist Party of China. And they have 5-year economic plans, which is something that Stalin invented. Stalin came up with the first 5-year economic plan in the Soviet Union in 1928. And the whole world said that the 5-year economic plan that Stalin came up with was insane. They laughed at it. They said no country could ever do this. And they actually achieved it in 4 years. They completed the first 5-year plan in 4 years. And then they had the second 5-year plan. And the Soviet Union became an industrial powerhouse with 5-year economic plans. And they defeated the Nazis. They invented space travel. They electrified the whole country with 5-year plans. And China, the Chinese Communist Party, to this day, has 5-year economic plans for China. And in fact, many socialist and anti-imperialist countries have 5-year plans. Ba'athist Arab socialist countries have 5-year plans, etc. So the Chinese government released this video about their latest 5-year plan. They just completed, I believe it's the 14th, China's 14th 5-year plan. So I thought I would show it here, right? Again, China's just all of China's success is because of the free market, Caleb. It has nothing to do with communism. It's like, give me a break. But so this is China talking about their latest 5-year plan.
Fewer than 180 days, China's 14th 5-year plan period will come to an end. As Zheng Shenjie, chairman of the NDRC, put it at a press conference on July 9th, the past 5 years have seen groundbreaking progress, transformative breakthroughs, and historic accomplishments. So what exactly has The answer is a great deal. Let's take a closer look. First up, the economy. China's GDP jumped from 110 trillion yuan to 120 trillion yuan, and then to 130 trillion yuan. And this year, it's on track, 140 trillion yuan. China's contribution to world economic growth has stayed at around 30% in recent years. From 2021 to 2024, its annual growth rate averaged 5.5%, which was one of the highest among major economies. Now let's talk green development. China's climate goals are no empty talk. They are backed up by concrete actions. Since 2021, energy use per unit of GDP has dropped by 11.6%. This reduction is equivalent to cutting 1.1 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions, and China is sharing its growth dividends with the world. The Belt and Road Initiative has brought together over 150 countries and 30 international organizations. As a result, real problems that matter: jobs, transportation, industry, and people's everyday lives. How about an example? The Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway in Indonesia. Its construction created over 50,000 local jobs.
Yeah, one good new.
What's more, in just over a year of service, it transported more than 10 million passengers. Locals call it high-tech and fast, and it's giving their economy a real boost. In short, over the past 5 years, China has become one of the most stable, reliable, and proactive forces for global development.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Bringing railway to developing countries. Now, what I thought was interesting is when they talked about they aren't using less energy. They're using less energy per GDP unit, right? I thought that was interesting. So their GDP is expanding, but the amount of energy that they have to use in order to get that GDP unit to expand is less. Now, that's a very interesting measurement. So they're not degrowing. They're just being more and more efficient in how they use their energy. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was pretty neat. So they're not saying energy consumption is bad, and they're definitely not saying growth is bad, but we're going to make our growth more efficient. Thought that was very cool. The government there has an obligation to make sure living standards are going up, to make sure the population is rising up from poverty. The state plans out the economy, and that's what they're about to end the 14th five-year plan, and there you go, right? And that's called socialism, right? I mean, that's what socialism is. Socialism is the state controlling the means of production, right? The centers of economic power being rationally organized and not left to the chaos of the market. Socialism is not the redistribution of wealth. That happens in every society, in every system. There's redistribution of wealth to some degree or other. Socialism is not the government doing stuff. Socialism is overcoming the irrationality of the market and having a pro-growth government that oversees the expansion of productive forces, right? It is overcoming the irrationality of profits in command, rationally organizing in order to have growth, and the ultimate goal is, to create a world of vast abundance where the banks, factories, and industries are rationally planned so that you have so much wealth that the need for a government goes away. There's just so much abundance. People can just do what they feel like doing, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. That is the ultimate goal. And it's understood that to achieve that, you need vast abundance. You need to eradicate scarcity from this earth, right? So that is what the Chinese Communist Party is doing. And they are, when it comes to communism, they have the most sensible approach, right? Marx said that the market, cannot have unlimited growth, that the market leads to this problem of gluts, of poverty created by abundance, people being homeless because there are too many houses, people being hungry because there's too much food. In the West, we bury cheese in a cave to keep the price of dairy high. People are terrified that self-driving cars might come into existence because it would lead to riots in the streets. And we have a very irrational economic system. Well, in China, the irrationality of the market is not in control, and society controls the means of production. And that's what Marx called for. He called for the centralization of the means of production into the hands of the state to overall increase the productive forces. And Lenin pointed out that capitalism in Marx's day was factory owners and factory workers, but in our age, it's bankers who dominate the entire planet and keep countries in poverty. And that countries in the East that were kept in poverty would have to establish their freedom by taking control of their economy. They would have to have socialism in order to break out of the domination of Western bankers who would keep them poor. And so Lenin understood that capitalism had moved to its next stage of imperialism. And under Stalin's leadership, the Soviet Union, under Lenin first and then later Stalin, the Soviet Union broke out of imperialism. They took control of the means of production, and they industrialized their country with 5-year economic plans, and they built up a new economy. And China started to do the same thing. Soviet Union had some big problems. They didn't have a market sector. Soviet Union's gone, but the Soviet Union laid the basis for the Chinese Revolution, for all kinds of global anti-colonial struggles. And now, rising around the world, we have economies that are like China, where the banks, factories, and industries are centrally planned, and the state has an obligation to eliminate poverty. And the goal is to eventually get to a world with so much wealth and abundance that the government goes away. Now, if that's what communism is, who could object to that, right? The idea that we should have a government that makes sure our lives are getting better, that plans out the economy to expand productive forces, a government that oversees increasing life expectancy and plans, the means of production, that raises countries up and wants to eventually get to a world with so much wealth that we don't even need to have a state any longer, and that people can just do what they want to do. I mean, that's pretty reasonable, I think. Now, if you insist that everyone be an atheist and embrace the dialectical philosophy, I can understand why people wouldn't like that. If you want to do things the old Soviet style, where the government owns like 91% of things, I can see why people would object. People say, I want to own my own business. I want to have small businesses, hotels, and restaurants. And but overall, the pretty basic understanding of communism that they have in China sounds pretty basic, right? State controls the means of production and plans out the economy to make sure living standards go up And as a result, we want to eventually get to a world of vast abundance. It's pretty basic. And I don't find anything objectionable about that. And I don't think most people would have any problem with it, right? If you wrap it up in all this other stuff, right? People think communism is the government's going to come take my wealth and give it to somebody who doesn't work. No, it already does that, right? It takes your wealth and gives it to weapons contractors. It takes your wealth and gives it to big corporations, takes your wealth and uses it to do all kinds of useless shit. That's already happening. Right? Your wealth is already being redistributed to people who don't deserve it. That's already happening. That's not what communism is. People say, well, communism is when the government's going to tell me what my religion has to be, or the government's going to take away my free speech. Well, no, that's already happening, right? And that's already happening. The government is deporting people from the country because they support Palestine, or charging them with being Russian agents because they don't agree with, supporting Ukraine. That's already happening, right? That's what we already have. And, there are communist governments that have done such things, but that's not the essence of what it is. If you just see it that way, society controlling the means of production to make sure that we have growth. I think most people would find it to be just basic common sense, right? Why shouldn't we have a government that's job is to deliver the goods, to make our life get better? If the economy is bad, people tend to blame the president and vote him out of office. If the economy is good, people tend to blame the president and he becomes very popular. We have a gut level understanding that the state should be working to carry out economic policies that improve our lives. So Anyway, I could go on and on about all these things, but I wanted to show one more clip here, which is this is Margarita Simonian, who is the leader of RT, the leader of the media company for which RT is part of, and she has been doing a lot of TV commentary in Russia lately. And this is some commentary that she gave about how basically Ukraine is trying to terrorize the Russian people into overthrowing Putin, and it's not going to work. It's a very, very dumb strategy. And she talks about this. This is what she said.
Сценарий, в котором они пытаются устроить бунт у нас. Они зачем устраивают коллапс в наших аэропортах в разгар курортного сезона? Зачем они на этой неделе пустили, я даже не знаю сколько беспилотников, но огромное количество на Сочи и на Сириус? Это какие такие военные объекты в Сириусе? Это одна большая школа. Мои дети, которые в этот момент были там, а я была в Москве, ночь провели в коридоре в количестве 9 человек. Граном двое всегда с нами живут племянники, еще на лето приезжают, естественно, там крестники, родственники. Вот эти 9 детей в повалку на полу в коридоре спали. Это вот все зачем делается? Какая у этого тактика военная? Тактика одна. Сделать так, чтобы люди, которые... в общем, нейтрально относятся к происходящему, не болеют ни за детей Донбасса, день памяти которых мы сегодня с грустью, нельзя сказать, отмечаем, вспоминаем этих детей. Есть же такие люди, таких людей много, я без всякого осуждения к ним отношусь, я считаю, что не все должны быть политизированы, люди разные, они пытаются расшатать этих людей с тем, чтобы они стали политизированы, но в другую сторону, с тем, чтобы возможность улететь отдыхать куда-то на море для них стала важнее, чем будущее страны, а будущее страны это и есть исход СВО, а исход СВО это... такая вот необходимость мириться с тем, что вот дети спят в коридоре, иногда можно куда-то не улететь, и отпуск, может быть, даже придется отменить. Они пытаются сделать так, чтобы мы сами себя победили, и в результате сами себе проиграли, как мы уже делали дважды в 20 веке, в его начале и в его конце.
Yeah. So, at this point, and as she just laid out in there, Ukraine's strategy is to make average Russians' lives miserable by forcing flights to be canceled, by preventing people from going on vacation, by making kids have to hide, etc. And the idea is that people in Russia that are not politicized, that are not supporters of the special military operation, will get mad and blame the Russian government for the fact that their flights are canceled, for the fact that their kids had to hide from drone strikes, etc. And then they'll turn against the government. That is the strategy. And it's not going to work, right? If anything, it's going to reinforce the understanding of why Russia has to intervene, because this is what the children of Donbass have been living under since 2014. They've been having to hide, and they've been facing drone strikes, etc. And that, the kind of terrorism that the Ukrainian government has been carrying out against the peoples in the Donbass region, they are now carrying that out against Russia in general, in the hopes that it will lead to the people who are not political, who don't understand what's going on, blaming the Russian government for it. And that seems to be the strategy. And I have shown this image on these streams over and over and over again because Wikipedia has banned this. There used to be a Wikipedia page about this monument, but Wikipedia banned it. They took it down. This is the monument to all the children that the Ukrainian government murdered since 2014 by drone striking and shelling and attacking the eastern regions. The very regions they say these are their own people, right? Now, these people identify as Russian, and they have voted. They want to join with Russia. But regardless, Ukraine claims these are their own people, and they've been killing them for year after year after year. And finally, when it was clear that they were just going to go in and slaughter these people, when Ukraine was also talking about getting nuclear weapons, etc., Russia had to move in, and it recognized the Donetsk People's Republic, and it went in to protect these folks. And, the war in Ukraine needs to end, and Donald Trump has set this deadline for it to end, but he's not being realistic. If you think that Russia is going to say, you know what? Okay, these people, they can go back to Ukraine. Ukraine can just keep killing these people. All right, you know what? All these people have died and all of this. You know what? We're just going to just let it go back to the way it was. That's delusional. No, I mean, Russia was very reluctant. They did not want to have to move in, and they tried, and they facilitated the Minsk agreement. They did everything they could to hold off launching the special military operation. And then they did. And now they're in it for real. And no, they're not just going to walk away and they just say, oh, okay, just keep killing these people. Yeah, just keep killing them. All right. Sorry about that. You know what I mean? Sorry about that. Oh, no. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Russia is not going to just abandon these folks. And, so Trump, he can say, he said 24 hours he could end this war. And that the truth is he could end this war. Just cut off Ukraine's support, just make an agreement about where the line is going to be. Zelensky could be out of power very soon, which I think would be a great, great thing. If Zelensky was out of power, that would be awesome because Zelensky is, not a good dude and is, very, very negative. But we'll see. Trump is sending all kinds of crazy mixed signals about Ukraine right now. He's claiming he's going to put crazy sanctions on all the BRICS countries, and and then he changed the deadline. He made it sooner, and I don't think Trump knows what he's doing. Honestly, it would be nice to see something good happen under the Trump administration. As of now, it's been a disaster. Between the El Salvador shit and now the crocodile alligator Alcatraz and deporting pro-Palestine people and bombing Iran. And Trump has been an absolute disaster. And he's going to pay for it at the polls. Things look really bad for the Republicans going into the midterms right now. Trump's approval rating is really low. It's weird. I see all these people saying that Trump is doing great things for the economy. I don't see that. That the tariffs are really benefiting American people. I don't see that. The Biden inflation is still happening. Trump's really got to deliver. If he wants to get any support, he really has got to deliver because, he's at this point, all the reasons that people voted for him had been betrayed. He was going to get us out of foreign wars. Oops. He was going to protect our freedom. Oops. He was going to fix the economy. Oops. As of now, and polling data shows it. It's not just Caleb's opinion. Maybe you don't care what I think. Look at the polling data. Trump is doing a dismal job. He's doing a dismal job. His supporters are all annoyed and pissed off. And now the intel I'm getting, not saying where it's coming from necessarily, is that September is going to be really important. That's the intel that I'm getting, is that September will be key. Now, that right now, the Trump administration is running in 5 or 6 different directions. There's people pulling it and pushing it in different directions. Pam Bondi, first there was no Epstein files, and then there were, and they don't know what they're doing. In September, they're going to know what they're doing, and things will be much more clear. That is what I'm being told. That's what's being passed to me through the grapevine. So I don't really know what that means. I assume it probably means that a lot of government officials are on vacation right now, which is like, how can you be on vacation with world affairs as they are? But what I'm hearing is that September, there will be a lot more clarity. There will be a lot more clarity. Elon Musk is going to be launching this new political party. There's some fighting going on behind the scenes. And September is when things will be much more clear with our administration. So, politics is a very messy business, and that, there's a lot of people. If I just had a YouTube channel where all I did was complain, and I just, cussed up and down and condemned and all of that, it would probably be much bigger. That's not what this YouTube channel is. I have built an organization called the Center for Political Innovation, and we are very actively trying to intervene in the process. And, we tried to, and we did successfully boost the peace with North Korea message during the election. And on top of that, we got a book out about Kamala Harris, and we have been distributing in bulk a book about the Houthi movement. We've been popularizing the great African leader Ibrahim Traore with the demonstrations that we've been holding. We have been trying to actively intervene. And that's a whole different ballpark. That's a whole different game than just getting on the internet and complaining. Anybody can get on the internet and complain, and it's just a whiz bang show. You just get on there and you do a show. But I'm actually trying to build an organization, right? The point is not simply to analyze the world. The point is to change it. And so we're building an organization, and that means we have to get our hands dirty. That means we have to talk to people in different spaces, etc. It means we have to maneuver with divisions in the ruling class, and that's what we're doing. So I am doing my best to build an organization, to educate people. I get on here. I'm going to be getting on here as much as I can. We got a lot of different projects going on. So shout out to everyone who came to our convention that we did. It was really great. More video of that is coming soon. If you've got any questions for the second half of the show, all you need to do is send a Rumble rant. I saw a bunch of Rumble rants have already come in, so that's great. I'm going to have a lively discussion in the second half of the show. You can also cash at me at CalebMoppin22. That would be appreciated if you can cash at me. And the second half of our show here will be me reading the rest of this book, Divisions in the Ruling Class, which I read the first half or so of it on Sunday, well over half of it on Sunday. Now I'm going to read you the rest of it. So, and then after that, we'll do the roll call. Then I'll answer your questions. So buckle up. We are going to finish this book tonight. Divisions in the Ruling Class. All right. Marx saw that capitalism had a built-in problem called overproduction. The more wealth that was produced and the more efficient production became, the greater economic stability and poverty resulted. William Z. Foster explained, naturally, a worker getting a wage of $3 to $5 a day cannot buy back the 10 to 20 or more dollars worth of commodities he has produced. This gap between his producing and buying powers widens by the constant increase in workers' productive capacity through machinery and speed up, and also by the lowering of their living standards. The capitalists waste a huge amount of the masses of these stolen commodities through luxurious living, by the creation of hordes of parasitic occupations, by immense military establishments and wars. They seek to dispose of them by export trade, but the surpluses are not exhausted by these means. there is an inevitable tendency to glut the market with unsaleable commodities, even though, as now, the millions of producers who make up the bulk of the population may actually starve and die for want of the barest necessities of life. The market suffers from overproduction. Marx coupled this with an understanding called the tendency of the falling rate of profit, showing that only human labor power creates value, and that reducing the role of workers in production, replacing them with machines, leads to less value being created and smaller profits for the capitalists over time. Nelson Peary explained it this way: what does robotics demand? The robots demand that their production be given away because there is no value to their production. What makes revolution absolutely inevitable is that we have a society based on the creation of value and production that is increasingly valueless. What is value? Value is the exchange relationship between things. This cup is worth so many tape recorders, or this pair of shoes is worth so many marbles. It is the relationship between things. Thus, if one robot is producing cups and another robot is producing tape recorders, how do you equate them? If a human makes a cup and a human being makes a tape recorder, you can equate their relationship by how much labor time went into making the cup and how much labor time went into making the tape recorder. You can establish relatively how many cups are worth how many tape recorders. But if a robot makes them, how do you then establish a value relationship between them? I don't think you can. Robots can make cars, but they can't buy them. Since production is increasingly carried out without human labor, without creating value, such production cannot be distributed with money. Money expresses value. Expended labor time is the basis of exchange, and it is represented by money. If the worker doesn't work anymore and the robot creates the commodities, how is it possible to sell them? You cannot sell them. And if you don't sell them, how are you going to distribute them? Sam Marcy explained it this way: profit does not come from machinery itself. It is the labor power of a worker. Worker produces greater value than they receive back in wages. And it is the unpaid portion of their labor that produces surplus value. But a robot is not a worker. A robot is a fixed or constant capital, which does not produce profit. The individual capitalists are driven to substitute labor-saving machinery for workers because it gives them a competitive advantage. For a certain period of time, the capitalist who is able to utilize the new technology and lower the unit cost of his product can actually enjoy a greater profit because the market reflects a generalized cost still based on the old technology. Eventually, however, the new technology itself becomes generalized and the rate of profit falls. The advantage to a higher composition of constant capital is always temporary. Moreover, it spurs on destructive competition, in which much equipment that could be still socially useful is made prematurely obsolete. In order to compensate for the falling rate of profit, the owners are forced to increase the volume of profit. This can only be done by further increasing production. Much of the economic literature deals with the displacement of jobs as the result of the introduction of high technology, but it does not deal with the decline in the rate of profit from the long-range point of view. Technology is a double-edged weapon. Furthermore, automation does not solve the problem of the capitalist contradiction that leads to economic crisis. On the contrary, it exacerbates it precisely because of the decline in the rate of profit. It increases the productivity of labor, but decreases the proportion of labor used in production in relation to the amount of fixed capital. The greatest and deepest economic crises of capitalism tend to follow the biggest technological leaps. As the efficiency with which capitalists can produce goods increases dramatically, the resulting crisis of poverty amid plenty becomes equally dramatic. As the Soviet Union was collapsing, the US economy was also suffering. Unemployment was rising and living standards were decreasing. Fred Goldstein wrote about how the first jobless recovery took place in the early 90s. As the recession of 1990 and 1991, US capitalism entered the era of jobless recoveries. For the first time, employment either continued to decline or remained flat along the economy long after the economy began to recover. Jobs were either being lost or remained flat for 18 months after the start of the economic upturn. Prior to that time, there had been a typical lag of 1 quarter or 3 months before the start of economic expansion and job recovery. The divergence between economic growth and joblessness caused concern among bourgeois economists for a while. However, after the 1990-1991 recession came the collapse of the USSR and Eastern Europe. There followed a surge of investment abroad, a technology boom at home, and the longest period of economic expansion in US history. The economists promptly forgot about the jobless recovery of 1991 to 92. They declared the arrival of a new economy and the end of history, speculating about the end of the business cycle. The US economy then stabilized due to the fall of the Eastern Bloc, the wave of foreign investment and expansion into China, and in the 90s, is remembered as a period of prosperity. However, at the end of the decade saw the crash on the Asian markets, which had a dramatic global impact. US money was pulled out of South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and many parts of Asia. As George W. Bush assumed the presidency, the US economy was suffering. Bush famously told the US public that if they wanted to help the country after the September 11th attack, they should, quote, go shopping. Goldstein explained, the hopes were that after 75 years of being constrained by socialist revolution and national liberation struggles, the collapse of the material center of the socialist camp would somehow allow infinite expansion and enable the capitalists to overcome the inner contradictions of their system. But, as Marx wrote, the real barrier of capitalist production is capital itself. The hopes of the bourgeoisie came crashing down in 2000 with the collapse of the technology bubble and the loss of jobs, along with $5 trillion in paper wealth. The vast expansion of capital to every corner of the globe could not eradicate the contradictions inherent in the profit system. It took a speculative boom in technology with hundreds of companies being created every week to pump up the economy, even with the overseas expansion. The capitalist downturn followed the boom, just as it had since 1825, when the first global downturn took place. More important than the downturn itself was the nature of the second jobless recovery that followed. It turned out that the jobless recovery of 1991 to 1992 had not been an anomaly, but an ominous harbinger of things to come. During the first 27 months of the next recovery, from November 2001 to March 2004, there was a net loss of 594,000 jobs. It took more than 5 years for the job level to reach the point at which it had been before the downturn began. According to Stephen Roach, the chief economist of Morgan Stanley at the time, job growth by 2004 was 8 million less than growth in a normal recovery. At the same time, all kinds of deregulation of lending were taking place under the advisement of U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan. The U.S. public was simply not buying houses, purchasing products, and consuming as they once had. The spending power of the American working class had decreased due to the elimination of good-paying industrial jobs, the reduction of the public sector, and many other factors. Americans couldn't keep spending as they once had, but the economy needed it. The explosion of debt in the early years of the 21st century was an attempt to keep the spending going, but it only worked for a little while. As Fred Goldstein explained, in the struggle to maximize profits, the capitalist class has always relied on new technology that drives workers to produce more and more in less and less time at lower and lower wages. Every capitalist is compelled to use technology as a matter of survival. It is a law of capitalism. This creates a huge contradiction, which gets worse and worse as capital grows. Under the capitalist system, no matter how wide the scope of its operation, production is driven forward by leaps and bounds under the impact of competition for profits. The bosses look for new, more productive technology and economies of scale to cut the labor costs, and this leads to ever expanding production, which outpaces the slow development of consumer power of society. The dramatic events of 2008, 2009, when the housing bubble burst, marked not only the end of a certain level of prosperity for the US public, but also the end of what is known as the late Cold War normal in American politics. The neoconservatives were out of power because they had botched the job. The Bush administration's policies after the 9/11 attacks had significantly weakened US imperialism on the global stage. After 9/11, Bush had declared that three countries, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, were the axis of evil. This had been in line with the neoconservatives and their vision for conducting regime change in a number of countries, as laid out in their document, Project for a New American Century. However, Brzezinski strongly objected to the Bush administration's moves. According to Brzezinski's biography, Zbigniew Brzezinski, America's Grand Strategist, by Justin Vasse, in Brzezinski's eyes, Bush's Monarchian approach was precisely the one that had to be avoided. This was because it masked the real political stakes by substituting morality for strategic reality, and because it made it harder for America's allies to go along. The result of Bush's policies in the short term seemed to benefit U.S. imperialism. Iraq, a stronghold of anti-imperialism in the region, was destroyed. Oil prices rose to the highest levels in history, over $120 per barrel, as a major oil-producing country that exported in competition with the United States was removed from the market. However, in the long term, the results of the U.S. invasion of Iraq and the war on terror strengthened the anti-imperialist camp. The sharp rise in oil prices after the U.S. invasion of Iraq enabled Russian President Vladimir Putin to speed ahead with his project of rebooting his country's economy with state control of oil and gas. Hugo Chavez in Venezuela also utilized the oil profits to fund his project of spreading socialism and anti-imperialism across Latin America. The hardliner faction of the Islamic Republic of Iran also got a boost. Bush referred to the war on terror as a crusade, alienating Muslims from potentially collaborating with the United States. The Muslim Brotherhood, a longtime ally of the United States, distanced itself from America as increasingly anti-Islamic tones came from Bush and his religious allies. Al Jazeera, a TV network funded by Qatar and sympathetic to the Muslim Brotherhood, put forward anti-U.S. sentiments in the Muslim world. France and Germany had loudly opposed the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and disunity within the NATO coalition enabled the recently emboldened Russia to make new business agreements. Russia began selling oil and gas to Europe at a much higher rate. With Bolivarian socialism rising in South America, Israel's 2006 invasion of Lebanon resulted in a humiliating defeat for Israel. Hezbollah, an anti-imperialist Islamic movement tied to Iran, became the heroes of the entire Muslim world for how effectively it repelled the Israeli invasion. Hurricane Katrina and the bungled response of the Bush administration opened the floodgates of rage and opposition to the U.S. government from the Black community. The Millions More March, led by the Nation of Islam in 2005, in the direct aftermath of Katrina, featured video messages from Cuban government officials, praise for Iran and China, and a call for the Black community to align with the anti-imperialist camp. With the world slipping out of U.S. domination and unrest potentially breaking out at home, the neoconservative strategies had to be chucked. The Eastern establishment was back, with a student of Brzezinski's foreign policy school suddenly becoming the darling of mainstream media. Barack Obama took office in the direct aftermath of the financial crash, with Brzezinski directly advising him. Obama had studied at Columbia University International Studies Department run by Brzezinski, and Obama was very much a product of the Eastern establishment, geostrategic, managerial wing of American politics. According to America's grand strategist, until the election of Barack Obama, Brzezinski assailed the ideas of neoconservatives and their Manichaean concept of the war on terror that had created a climate of irrational fear and Islamophobia within the population, and had at the same time given leaders in Russia, in Israel, an unhoped-for tool for dressing up their own repressive policies. When Obama was attacked for having someone on staff who had praised Stephen Walt and John Mearsheimer's book, The Israel Lobby, Obama and Brzezinski met directly to discuss the matter. Brzezinski described how much he liked Obama, saying, quote, "I was immensely impressed by him. After Kennedy, this is the most politically and intellectually impressive would-be candidate for president." The rise of Barack Obama marked the seizure of power by the Eastern establishment. In response to the economic crisis and the rising anti-imperialist bloc around the world, they sought to swiftly implement degrowth policies. They want to lock down the Western countries and the world and roll back the wheels of history in the hopes of securing their position at the top. The managerial bourgeoisie is battling against both lower levels of capital at home and the anti-imperialist countries around the world, both of whom reject their vision of a high-tech dark age, a tightly controlled capitalism to contain and gradually eliminate humanity. Obama faced a wave of opposition as he took office from the lower levels of capital, primarily fracking companies, who saw big oil as their main competitors and were riding a wave of profits from Bush's high oil prices. However, Obama and the Eastern establishment had a new weapon in their arsenal to use against the insurgent lower levels of capital: social media. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms, rolled out in coordination with the intelligence agencies, shifted the discourse very much in Obama's favor and against the right wing that opposed him. Within the Obama administration, Jared Andrew Cohen, formerly a member of the board of Google Alphabet, functioned as the liaison between the State Department and the tech monopolies. An article from The New Yorker, published in April of 2011, described how Jared Andrew Cohen went to Twitter and advised them to take actions to destabilize Iran without Obama's permission, and how he, quote, almost lost his job over it. If it had been up to the White House, they would have fired him. The article goes on to say that Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State, protected him. Quote, Clinton did not betray any disagreement with President Obama over the Iran policy, but in an interview with me, she cited Cohen's action with pride. The Arab Spring seems to have been an event that largely was engineered in order to help Americanize the world and get ahead of any spontaneous unrest that may have resulted from the economic crisis. With social media and assistance from Al Jazeera, which shifted to a pro-American tone in the age of Obama, various, quote, revolutions were pushed and enabled to happen in ways that benefited the U.S. ruling class. Socialism was overthrown in Libya. Syria faced a horrendous civil war that created millions of refugees and spawned the horrific terrorist organization known as ISIS. Trump's presidency, however, seemed to represent resistance to the Obama administration and its strategies from the lower levels of capital. Instead of staffing his administration with academics from Eastern establishment think tanks and institutes, Trump staffed his administration with lower-level capitalists. millionaires and billionaires who are not part of the club. Betsy DeVos, the heiress of the Amway fortune, became Secretary of Education. Eric Prince of Blackwater Academy became a prominent figure within the Trump movement, as did Peter Thiel of PayPal. Elon Musk is part of the Trump universe, and his assumption of control of Twitter involved many revelations of how the FBI had coordinated with social media to manipulate discourse and suppress Trump and his allies. The lower levels of capital are furious with the Eastern establishment for a very obvious reason. They want to make more money. The Eastern establishment is focused on degrowth, reducing consumption, reducing the population, and rolling back the wheels of history in order to stay on top. The lower levels of capital want more profits and find policies intended to stabilize and gradually reduce economic output to be infuriating. However, another factor must be taken into account: the rising alternative economy. China was once the impoverished sick man of Asia, but under the leadership of the Communist Party, it has become an industrial powerhouse and the second largest economy on earth. With socialism, the USSR industrialized and became a superpower, and Putin rescued the country from Western looting that followed the fall of the USSR in the 90s. Bolivarian socialism, Baathism, the Islamic Revolution of Iran, the Houthi movement in Yemen, the Belt and Road Initiative, the Eurasian Economic Union, the BRICS are all focused on creating economic growth. The global axis of resistance is opposing the system that Lenin called capitalism in its monopoly stage, imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. This is a system where economic development is halted across the planet, and the world is forced to stay poor and get poorer so wealthy financial institutions based in Western countries can enrich themselves and stay at the top. In the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, this end was achieved mainly with economic neoliberalism. The World Trade Organization and the International Monetary Fund forced countries to privatize their natural resources, deregulate foreign trade, and have their economies crushed by Western monopolies through deregulation, laissez-faire approach. NAFTA destroyed the agricultural sectors of Mexico and Haiti. Oil-rich African countries like Nigeria remained impoverished as Western supermajors were given an unlimited access, almost unlimited access with nothing going back into the domestic economy. Since the 2008 financial crisis and the rise of the BRICS, the strategies of the Western imperialist monopolies have shifted, but the goal remains the same. Instead of privatizations and deregulation justified with the belief that the free market magically creates growth, the looting and forced impoverishment of the developing world is coming in the form of environmental decrees, forbidding the construction of new power plants, restrictions on living conditions, COVID lockdowns, and other measures that restrict development. As Barack Obama put it when speaking to a group of African students, quote, "Ultimately, if you think about all the youth that everyone has mentioned here in Africa, if everybody is raising living standards to the point where everyone has got a car and everyone's got air conditioning and everyone's got a big house, well, the planet will boil over." Imperialism is degrowth. Iraq had broken free of Western domination and with control of its oil resources had begun to develop. Libya had done the same. American cruise missiles and bombs cast both countries into a state of chaos and impoverishment once again. The anti-imperialist countries of the world are all striving for growth. The working class, suffering from lower living standards amid a high-tech economy that has less and less of a place for them, is also striving for growth. The lower levels of capital are also striving for growth. This creates a situation for a new realignment to defeat imperialism. Let us recall that after the Second World War, the stated goal of the Communist Party of the United States was the creation of an anti-monopoly coalition that aligned with the Soviet Union against the war makers and imperialists. William Z. Foster described it this way, quote, "In order for the people to put the United States firmly on the path toward peace, democracy, and general well-being, the power of the monopolists who dominate our country must be curbed and finally broken. The way our party foresees the possible development for the future is along the following general lines. First, we propose the regular election of a democratic coalition government. based on a broad united front combination of workers, small farmers, Negroes, professionals, small business groups, and other democratic elements who are ready to fight against monopoly, economic breakdown, fascism, and war. William Z. Foster's orientation remains more or less correct. The ultra-rich monopolists who are seeking to maintain the global order with degrowth amid a long-term crisis of overproduction can be overcome by the creation of a united front. Much like in the oppressed countries where the working class sits at the center of a revolutionary movement for the rejuvenation of the entire nation, conditions have gotten to the point that such a coalition is possible in the imperialist homelands as well. Just as Mao's bloc of four great classes drove out the imperialists and pushed China onto the course of development, the United States could undergo a similar development. The lower levels of capital, the working class, those aligned with the anti-imperialist countries, those who want economic growth and reject the emerging low-wage police state, can be unified to bring to power a government that battles the big monopolies and brings society into motion. There are a few factors that prevent this from happening. First, that is that the socialist politics in the West have become completely subordinated to protecting the deep state from Trump and from the lower levels of capital. Most socialist groups do not support existing Marxist-Leninist governments, and among those who do, those who understand their foreign policy and stand with Russia, Iran, and Venezuela and other Marxist-Leninist anti-imperialist states are a very small minority. Much of the so-called left has decided that existing socialist countries are fascist, and furthermore echo that Donald Trump is supposedly a fascist for supporting Russia and North Korea. The socialist left has completely been commandeered into being foot soldiers of the Eastern establishment, the most dangerous wing of U.S. capitalism. Many socialists are now claiming degrowth is somehow compatible with Marx's vision of a stateless, classless world based on vast abundance. Any forces that seek to build a real anti-monopoly coalition in the United States as a road to defeating imperialism must break with the left, as such ideas are unwelcome in leftist circles. The left focuses on LGBT and identity politics, and a vicious cancel culture is unleashed on anyone who would dare assert anything close to the agenda of William Z. Foster or the Communist Party. The synthetic left, or woke forces that operate as the foot soldiers of the Eastern establishment, are an outgrowth of CIA manipulation of leftist politics. They emerged in three distinct phases. One, they emerged first with the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom program, Project MKUltra, and various foundations funded to promote left-wing activism during the 1960s. During this period, they were an intentional manipulation meant to supplant and prevent the rise of a genuine communist movement in the West. Two, during the late 70s and 80s, these forces were dispatched to the communist and anti-imperialist countries of the world. They ideologically contaminated the ruling parties with anti-Stalinism and, quote, democratic socialism and a kind of classless striving for universal human values. They courted factions within anti-imperialist governments to become liquidators like Gorbachev and Yeltsin. They polluted the culture of anti-imperialist countries, bringing in cultural hedonism, pornography, drugs, and other cultural factors to demoralize the youth. They set the stage for color revolutions that enabled Western imperialism to reconquer countries. They did what hardline right-wingers could never do. With their leftist approach, they were able to sneak in and subvert anti-imperialist and socialist countries internally. Three, in response to the 2008 financial crisis, these forces have been brought back to the United States. The color revolution apparatus has come home to function as the enforcers of the Eastern establishment in its desire to lock down and degrow the United States. The FBI and CIA work with them in their efforts to suppress sections of the U.S. state and layers of the population that will not accept the sinister visions dreamed up by the Rockefeller think tanks. The tech monopolies back them up. We must understand that what this synthetic left or woke current is, and we must not confuse it with genuine anti-imperialism or socialism. The only thing this current takes from Marxism is the dialectical philosophy, the aesthetic of rebellion, and the spiritual roots of Marxism from the French Revolution. They do not support existing communist governments. They do not promote Marxist economics, and they do not seek to empower the broad masses of the working class. The synthetic left are not comrades who have gone astray. They are the main danger. The synthetic left, out of the movement to the masses, means cutting ties with them, going to recruit those who seek to resist the low-wage police state that they are working to impose. Another factor that makes the needed pro-humanity, pro-growth coalition difficult to build is that the lower levels of capital continue to propagate the idea that deregulation and free markets are the solution. Like the Birchers of the 1960s, they confusedly think the Eastern establishment are communists. They envision that if total deregulation is implemented, the problems facing society arising from the market will simply vanish. They live in a world of Cold War anti-communist ignorance, where communists think everyone should be poor and believe money is bad and want to make everyone equal. However, during the Trump administration, it became clear that he couldn't simply deregulate. On multiple occasions, Trump used the state and its resources to protect his supporters. As the crisis intensifies, the lower levels of capital will start to realize that deregulating won't help them. Rather than getting the government out of the way, they'll more and more want a government that punches in the same direction, striking against their enemies, the way Biden's state is currently striking against them. The process of Bonapartism involves the state centralizing in the hands of a few capitalists who utilize it to suppress rivals within their own camp. While the Eastern establishment is the primary Bonapartist faction, calls for Bonapartism from the other direction will materialize soon enough. It will be difficult because anti-communism and worship of capitalism have been central to American right-wing politics for so long. The admiration for Vladimir Putin and the kind of conversations being had by Tucker Carlson are the beginning of a trend that will take a significant amount of time to play out. Old ways of thinking are gradually unlearned with new conditions. We cannot forget, however, that during the Great Depression, other than the obscure Austrian school academics, every faction of the ruling class was aligned with, quote, socialists of some variety. The Communist Party had no monopoly on socialism, as Social Democrats and fascists both condemned capitalism and called for state control to improve working conditions. They differed in who their enemies and targets were and who they offered to empower. Fascist socialism involved degrowth measures. Social democracy involved welfare state reforms, and only communists offered a change in property relations. In the third world, libertarian rhetoric is largely non-existent, and every faction is offering promises of some brand of socialism or other. It is also important to point out that socialism has changed since the Soviet years. 21st century socialism involves a vast market sector promoted by the state. Deng Xiaoping economic reforms are the model that Vietnam followed, and Cuba and People's Korea are striving to be more like this. Deng's economic policies were also a big influence on Putin's reinvention of the Russian economy. Bolivarian socialism in Nicaragua and elsewhere has utilized micro-entrepreneurship programs and independent cooperatives. 21st century socialism is not hostile to lower-level capitalists, but sees them as part of the equation of maintaining a rationally planned economy to ensure long-term growth and move toward the ultimate goal of a world free from scarcity. The calls for a government of action that would take swift action to control natural resources, build infrastructure, strategically control the lending of money in order to stimulate growth, cancel debt, and enact an economic Bill of Rights is a vision that would embolden the lower levels of capital and allow them to function in the context of a more prosperous economy. It would empower them by weakening and destroying the big monopolies. As the crisis intensifies, the lower levels of capital will realize that such a government of action is needed to prevent their total destruction at the hands of the ultra-rich. The process of building the needed anti-monopoly coalition will be very difficult. It will not be a quick solution. Building this coalition is not a matter of going viral on social media or becoming a popular commentator on current affairs. Building this coalition will mean creating a network of people who can operate in coordination with each other to carry out real operations to achieve short-term goals. Building this coalition will mean testing people, training people, making mistakes and learning from them, gradually solidifying an apparatus that can be more and more effective as the crisis intensifies. In Mao Zedong's theory of people's war, there is a concept called strategic equilibrium. This refers to the moment when the countryside is securely under the grip of the revolutionary forces, and the remaining task is to seize the urban centers. In the moment of strategic equilibrium, the tactics of the Revolutionary Army completely change as the battlefield has completely changed. A new balance of power necessitates new tactics, new alliances, and a complete change in operations. In the revolutionary process of the United States, moving toward an anti-monopoly government, there will be a moment of strategic equilibrium. It will be a moment in which the level of desperation on the part of the population becomes much more intense very quickly, and the divisions in the ruling class take on a much more violent and overt character. In such a moment, a network of people who can cooperate and rely on each other to carry out effective operations will be vital. And the various distractions of social media and fandoms will be rendered pretty much irrelevant. Working to construct the anti-monopoly, pro-humanity, pro-growth coalition must be done with this in mind. There will be a moment when millions of Americans are hungry and desperate to eat and have security in their existence. There will be a moment when factions in the ruling class begin to violently suppress each other, and sections of the currently existing U.S. state are actively fighting each other with weapons. We do not seek to create this crisis, and it will happen regardless of our intervention. Our strategy must focus on having our apparatus in place for when the crisis does arise, so we can maneuver effectively within it, maintain vital alliances in which we are useful allies, and provide the services and organizational apparatus necessary to bring a layer of thousands of people into our milieu. The challenge of the moment is to build our own organization and plant the seeds of the needed coalition with the moment of strategic equilibrium in mind. Many who knew Vladimir Lenin recalled interacting with him personally and remembered an anecdote written by Leo Tolstoy. He often told his followers to explain the activities of the Bolshevik Party in the lead up to taking power. Lenin's wife, Krupskaya, recalled it this way. He was going along and he saw from afar a man squatting and waving his arms about in a ridiculous way. A madman, he thought. But when he drew nearer, he saw it to be a man sharpening a knife on the curb. The same thing happens in theoretical disputes. From the outside, it seems a sheer waste of time. But when you go into the matter more deeply, you see that it is a momentous issue. We should expect the coming period to be one of confusion, realignments, betrayals, splits, and all kinds of different twists and turns. But this is all preparation for the moment when a solid organization will be the vital factor in changing society and nothing else will matter. And that's the book, Divisions in the Ruling Class, right? Where I lay out my thesis about the lower levels of capital versus the ultra-rich, imperialism, degrowth, all of that is in here. So that's the whole book. So go and get a copy of it today. I will be cutting this so we have a full audio book online. It's an important book. I'm very proud to have written it. And yeah, it's a chapter, it's a section of our bigger textbook called Out of the Movement to the Masses. So there you go. There you go. All right. Let's do the roll call. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Who's with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who's with us? Jenny in Cincinnati. Welcome. Ryan in Kansas City. Welcome, welcome. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. America's hometown, Plymouth. Noah. Shout out to Noah. Bendigo, Australia, David Fox. Southwest Missouri. Ed in Louisville. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations. Alex in Brazil. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Raphael in Glasgow, UK. Welcome, Raphael. Good to have you with us. Richard in Woodland, holding it up and down and left and right. Well, there you go. Very good. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Phil in Brooklyn. John in Florida. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to have you. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Rise from Adelaide, Australia. Good to talk to you, Rise. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? So we do have a number of Rumble rants that have come in, which is good. That gives me something to talk about. We are accepting questions tonight. Jane from New Zealand, St. David's, Bermuda, Luca in Singapore. If you have a question, you can cash at me, Caleb Maupin 22, or you can send a Rumble rant. Those are the two ways we are taking questions. Some people think I ought to switch to Kick, and I'm starting to think that might be a good idea because it is, I don't know. We'll see. Scott in Maryland, seasoned noob in China. I may switch to Kick. I'm going to stay on YouTube. I'm not going to give it my spot on YouTube, but it may be that we start doing Kick. We'll see. We'll see. We will see. But anyhow, so I would like to put some music on before I start answering people's questions. Generally, I do that. Let me see if I can find a good piece of music to play while I use the bathroom, and then we go ahead and answer people's questions. I generally like to put music on. So what music should be put on? What music would be good to put on? Just looking for something good to put on. What have I got here? What have I got here? How about Green Sleeves? Want to do Green Sleeves? One of my favorite old English songs. Green Sleeves.
Alas, my love, you do me wrong to cast me off discourteously, and I have loved you so long, delighting in your company. Green sleeves was all my joy, green sleeves was my delight, green sleeves was my heart of gold, and who but my lady Green Sleeves? I have been ready at your hand to grant whatever you crave. I have both rage at life and hand, your love and gold with thought to have. Green sleeves was all my joy, green sleeves was my delight, green sleeves was my heart of gold, and who but you may green sleeves? leaves no farewell adieu. To God I pray to prosper thee. For I am still thy lover true. Come once again and love me. Green sleeves was all my joy. Green sleeves was my delight. Green sleeves was my heart of gold. And who but my lady Green sleeves?
So there you go. There you go. That was Green Sleeves, the classic old English song. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So I guess now I will start answering people's questions. All right. First question from Leo Messi. Is Hudsonian and economics the alternative to Trumpian economics? Our productive economy has been in decline in spite of so-called growth. Michael Hudson is a Marxist economist. I believe he's got like some family connection to Trotsky. I believe like his father was like Trotsky's secretary or something like that. He's from like a Trotskyite family. And his work is pretty good. He talks about overproduction, etc. And he really emphasizes debt and financialization. But I don't think he's, setting economic policy. I do know that China seems to be somewhat sympathetic towards him and to promote his work to some degree. I don't know. He's just a Marxist economist. I don't know what more to say about him. I do know that at one point he was friendly to the LaRouche people, but then he had a falling out with them. And that the National Caucus of Labor Committees, they were originally a Trotskyite group, and that he was never, I don't think he was a member, but he they have a lot of good stuff on economics that they publish, and he was sympathetic to a lot of their approach. And then there was some kind of very dramatic falling out or something. And Michael Hudson, he's just a Marxist economist. He does a lot of interviews. He's big at the Left Forum and stuff like that. I don't know quite what to say about him. He's just a Marxist economist. And I don't know if I would say that, Michael Hudson's economic theories are the alternative to Trumpism necessarily. There was some hope that Trump represented, at least to some degree, an element of what do you call it? Opposition to the financialization of capital. The fact that Trump's name was on buildings, the fact that Trump is associated with hotels and he likes to build things. There was a hope that, and probably to some degree or other among the U.S. public, people saw his wealth as more genuine because it was associated with actual buildings rather than just with Wall Street derivative ripoff schemes. But Trump hasn't really imposed any dramatic economic reforms. He basically has governed in terms of economic policy. He's George W. Bush. I mean, he tax cuts for the rich, environmental deregulation. It's not, he's not dramatically changing the economy to any degree. So yeah, I don't think there's, I don't think Trump doesn't represent a certain type of economics. But at the same time, I guess Hudson's economic policies are opposed to his. Some people may have thought there was some overlap because Hudson emphasizes debt and, what Marx called fictitious capital, but at the same time, Trump hasn't done anything about that. So there we go. Now, Horse Stevens said, "Hey, Caleb, here's an idea. How about some live classes on China?" That's a good idea. Why not? I know a lot about China's history. I could do some PowerPoints, some slideshows. Those slideshows I do tend to be quite popular. We do have a whole list of slideshows now, by the way. For some reason, when I started doing these slideshows, I figured out how to do them. People really liked the slideshows and found them to be very informative. And, I saw people in the comments from the Uhuru movement, and all kinds of people have said, "Oh, I love those slideshows that you do, Caleb. I just love them." So hey, I've made a playlist of slideshows. I can send that here. I'll put it in the chat, and I'm gonna keep doing slideshows. They're a good way to organize my thoughts, right? So yeah, here we'll put that in the chat. Slideshows, right? There we go. If you like the slideshows, I always cut them afterwards. Right? Slideshows. I mean, it's something I've done, in the past. I've done these slideshows, and I'll keep doing them. And maybe I need to do a slideshow on China. Yeah, there you go. Slideshows. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. Live classes on China. Yeah. A few years back, a Chinese man, who's a friend of mine, gave a class, Introduction to Socialism with Chinese Characteristics, which was very good. And it's pretty far back, but I can link it. It was a very, very all-inclusive class that had a lot of powerful information in it. And it got quite a few views. That's up to 26,000 views. Intro to Socialism with Chinese Characteristics. So this is a pretty good class that my friend gave. So I think that guy has actually moved back to China because the atmosphere in America has gotten so hostile. But yeah, this is the class. It's very good. This guy's a lawyer. It's not Irving Lee, not Irving Lee. It's someone else. Yeah, Governance of China. Those are the speeches of Xi Jinping. There's like 3 or 4 volumes. You can buy them. You can buy them at American bookstores. Yeah, but Intro to Socialism and Chinese Characteristics is a very good class that was given. So, and then I did a class called Mao and American Socialists, where I went over like the relationship between the Chinese Revolution and the American left. And that was a pretty decent class that I gave a while back, and I can link that as well. Yeah. Mao and American Socialists. And that class goes into a lot of detail on the history of the Chinese Revolution, but also American activism. And I really felt good about the class. I had done a lot of research, and so we got that as well. The video is not very high quality for this older stuff because, I had barely any resources back then. I rented to do these classes. I rented it was a driving school. You used to be able to rent this driving school in Midtown Manhattan. And so I would rent a classroom at the driving school, and we would go there and have classes. And that was before CPI. It was when we were the Students and Youth for a New America clubs. And, it's pretty wild how these things work. I'm serious. I've always been serious. There were a lot of people who went to those classes who were not serious, and they liked just kind of hanging out and talking politics. But I was always saying we want to build a real group. And, when I did actually build a real group, they betrayed me. And what's wild is that, I'm accused of all kinds of stuff, but it's like, the kind of things you might talk about with a group of friends who you go out to dinner after you have some classes, the kind of things you might talk about with people who come over to your house, people who hang out with you, are different than obviously what you would talk about in a professional organization. And, I don't know. It's just sad. There are a lot of people who they like this kind of stuff until it's time to do anything about it. Right. They like this kind of stuff until it's serious. Right. They love to sit there and say, oh, maybe someday we can, do this, or maybe someday we can do that. Well, I'm actually doing it. CPI, we're actually doing it. We had a 7-day program. We had a convention. We were in the streets of New York City with a banner. We're actually doing it. And a lot of these people, they smoke a lot of pot. I'll tell you that. They smoke a lot of pot. They live with their parents, and, oh, we're going to actually do it. Oh, we can't. It's very sad, you know. And this is the story. A lot of people have had this experience, you know, and but I am serious. We're going to actually do it, and and yeah. So there you go. I don't know what more to say about it. I mean, those people. I'm actually doing it. I'm actually doing things. I'm traveling around the world. We're building this organization, and they're, they've turned against me and decided I'm an evil person, and they're still smoking a lot of pot, right? So who remembers the Leaning Annex? I've never heard of the Leaning Annex. What is a Leaning Annex? I don't know what that is. All right. Next question. Why is Modi still in BRICS if he's fucking up his relationship with China? Modi represents a layer of wealthy people in India that have enough money to be independent. And sometimes Modi pivots in the pro-US direction. Other times he's pro-China or pro-Russia. He has a particular rivalry with China. There's border disputes, etc. But Russia and Modi are quite close. And that Modi is a Hindu nationalist. And Modi, I mean, he's kind of a Bonapartist, and for his faction of the Indian ruling class, and he does not agree with U.S. foreign policy on a number of things. Yeah, I mean, Modi is kind of like Erdogan in Turkey, and we're going to see more of these guys, kind of independent leaders that there's enough wealth. Brazil is like this. Brazil can go both ways. They have enough money, they can be independent. They have enough of their own domestic economy that they're not socialist, but they're not in the imperialist camp either. They can go either way. And India is like that. And India wants to make money, and there's a lot of wealth creation happening in Russia and China, places like that. They want to be in on it. And when they were kind of asked by the United States to just go all in against Russia, they wouldn't do it. Yeah. That doesn't mean they always get along with China on everything, but, they are more independent of U.S. domination. So there you go. All right. Hey, Kayla. Oh, I already did that one. BRICS, India. Can you comment on Trump's 10-day ultimatum to Russia? He keeps changing it. It was a 50-day ultimatum. Then it was a 13-day ultimatum. He keeps changing it. And, if Trump actually does what he says he's going to do, he will completely wreck the world economy, and it won't benefit Trump. It just won't. So, I mean, I find his threats to be kind of unrealistic. I'm a little disturbed because Trump seems to be under the illusion that he can end the Ukraine war in a way that will benefit the West. And that's just not going to happen. Right. And Zelensky is on the verge of being ousted. Right. There's a huge effort to oust Zelensky. And it may be that the war actually ends soon. And I hope that that's the case. But my concern is that it appears to me that Trump wanted to end the war in a way that would make him look good. And it seems like he's discovering there's no way he can end the war and look good. It does seem to me that Tulsi Gabbard's revelations about how Russiagate was all cooked up may have been a necessary thing to happen before Trump ended the war, right? It may be that Trump had to really get out there. No, Russia did not intervene in the elections to get me elected. Trump had to really clear his name on that. So maybe there is some effort to actually end the war in Ukraine going on. Tulsi Gabbard certainly, has been well connected in the circles of people that understand the other side of this conflict. Tulsi Gabbard spoke at the Rage Against the War Machine protest in Washington, D.C., which CPI sponsored. I've met Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm hoping that Tulsi Gabbard's revelations, the atmosphere to oust Zelensky, all of this could eventually set the stage for Trump to end the war. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, Trump is not saying good things right now. I'll just say that much. So we'll just have to see. We have to push for the best, and we don't have the luxury and the privilege of just sitting back and condemning. We have to, whenever we see something good potentially happening, we have to boost it. We have to push it, right? I see the unrest in Angola, and we're calling for Isabel dos Santos to return to power in Angola. And again, we have to be optimistic, and we have to push for anything positive. John wrote a great article for the website about Tulsi Gabbard broke Trump out of jail. And now with these new revelations that Russiagate is a complete hoax, Trump has more freedom to make peace with Russia. So, we have to push forward any positive motion that we can. We don't have the luxury of just sitting back and saying, oh, everybody sucks. We can't do that. We have to actually try and change the world, not just be good complainers. So, yeah, there you go. But yeah, last one. Why were Russia and China hesitant to interact with the DPRK in the 2000s and 2010s? For a pretty obvious reason, which is that Russia and China are both signatories of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? There's a treaty that's been signed that basically says if you don't have nuclear weapons already, you can't get them. That nuclear countries can't give nuclear weapons to other nuclear armed countries. And Russia and China and the United States need that treaty to remain intact so that we don't, have a situation where the USA gives all of its allies nukes, then they have to give all of their allies nukes, and then pretty soon there's a whole bunch of nukes all over the world, and eventually one of them goes off and we have a nuclear Armageddon and everyone dies. Right. And because Russia and China really don't want to have a new arms race, and they really don't want a situation where, all of the US's allies are getting nuclear weapons. Because of that, they had to go along with punishing North Korea for leaving the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. North Korea is the only country in the world to have ever left the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They signed it and then they quit. Now, you're allowed to quit according to the treaty, and I know that. However, the threat from the United States is if you don't help us punish North Korea for leaving, we might leave it ourselves. And that, Russia and China need the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to remain intact. And because North Korea left the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, they were forced to cooperate with punishing them, unfortunately. And that's just how these things work. Again, it's about the balance of forces. At this point, Russia and North Korea are closer than ever before. China was always pretty close to North Korea, even when, they were cooperating and there was sanctions, etc. And now Russia and North Korea are very close. They have a very, very close economic relationship. There are North Korean soldiers fighting in Ukraine. Putin and Russian officials are always going to North Korea. And, Trump wanted to reopen negotiations with Kim, and North Korea basically rebuffed him because they're waiting for the war in Ukraine. At this point, North Korea and the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula is tied up very closely with the Ukraine war. Because North Korea and Russia are so close, and because North Korea is militarily involved in the Ukraine war, they can't be making peace with the United States and with South Korea while the war in Ukraine is still going on. So the war in Ukraine has to end so that North Korea can move toward peaceful reunification. These two conflicts are tied in. All these conflicts are tied in, but especially right now, the North Korea situation and the Russia-Ukraine situation are very, very close and intimately tied together. And that's just the reality. And, I advocate peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And, we had a whole campaign about that, et cetera. And we intend to keep doing that. Yeah, Russian tourism. There's a summer camp. A bunch of Russian kids are at summer camp in North Korea right now. North Korea's opened a whole summer camp for Russian kids. Isn't that nice? They're running like a summer camp for Russian kids. There's hotels opening up. All kinds of Russians are going to North Korea. Russia and North Korea are very close. So there you go. Yeah. So, yeah. So I wanted to let you all know we are gradually posting more video from the Chicago sessions, which are the Q&A session that we did in where was it? In after the convention. So yeah, I thought I might show the latest one. Hold on. Yeah, this is the latest video from the Chicago sessions. It's got Briggy in it, so Here we go.
Landscape of CPI. What's come to mind is that we are in an amazing time in history. This is our time. I'm excited about that. Imagine running a race, and as each person is running, they hand a baton to the next person in the leg of that race. This is our time. We have the baton, and we are running into the future. Someone handed the baton to us. We decided to take that baton, and we decided to run. We decided to create a legacy for others who will come after us and say, okay, now we have an opportunity to go forward. So I was really excited just to visualize that. I'm a visual person. I'm able to conceptualize how a future could look by where I am now and by what's happening now, and also by what I've learned being here at CPI and what I've learned before I even got here. My own struggles, my own waiting for an opportunity for a door to open where people are doing real activism instead of just like, okay, I'm going to be on the internet. This person said this, but then it turns out they were really just there for their own, aggrandizement for themselves, which we all know where that leads. It's never anywhere good. So I wanted to put that out there, and I also wanted to say I was talking to Gavin on the way here, and we were just discussing things about the issue of like job programs came up, and I was saying to him, look, there are job programs all around us. Like, look at all of these wires and things that, for our infrastructure. Those things should be buried underground. That would be a job program, would be like 20 years right there. And it led me to think about a time I was having dinner with someone who was in advertising. And what they said was, wherever there's a frustration, there's money to be made. And that really stuck with me. Yeah. And so now we're in a time where America creates frustrations and they extract money from those frustrations. They extract wealth from the bottom and as they create these frustrations. Now there are good frustrations and there are bad frustrations. A good frustration would be those job programs to make sure that our water is clean, to make sure that the infrastructure is taken care of. That is going to create wealth. The wealth they say that is not here for us, it's all around us. But those corporations that own those private companies don't want to invest in the infrastructure, but they're willing to extract wealth while giving us very little service in return. And so all we do is complain about it. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't vote our way out of it. So what can we do about it? Well, we come together and then we show them that we're just not going to take it lying down. A part of, and that's important. But here's the other part. If we owned the commons, if we owned that infrastructure, right, we would have enough money. There would be enough to go around because we're not going to foul our own water. We're not going to foul the air. We are going to make sure that we have what we need to take care of each other. But the corporations don't think that way. They're very hung up on their stock buybacks. They're very hung up on, their lavish yachts, and they're willing to tell us how we should live while they take private jets everywhere. Yeah. See what I mean? So that in and of itself is that's bold to me. And also, in my last thing that I want to say is Chairman Mao said something. I was speaking with Connor before we sat down, and he said something, and it reminded me of a quote that he said that women hold up half the sky. Yeah. And that really resonated with me because when you were just talking to me about it, it just reminded me of that quote. And how we as women in the movement, we don't have to be here. It's a very male-dominated space. So all the men know that if there are women here, we really want to be here. We have a voice, but we have a say in how this movement moves forward, how it progresses, and what we want to do to push it forward in a way that is, not so much, I'm not saying inclusive, but we do have a role here. And it is also to speak to other women as well, because a lot of them don't get it. It's very niche and it's very granular at times. and it requires a lot of sacrifice because a lot of people have homes, they have kids, jobs, but you've got to take the time to do it because someone took the time for us. So again, pushing it forward, taking that baton and running into the future with all the knowledge, the passion, the love, everything that we have for each other. It is a sacrifice, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
We're glad. I'll speak to two things that you said. The first is that there's a quote from Karl Marx. He said, "You can judge any revolutionary movement by the participation of women." And I assumed that that was Karl Marx making a feminist statement. And it took me organizing to realize there's a lot more to that quotation than just saying that women should be equal and calling for women's liberation. He was also pointing out to a reality that, you know, women are better organizers than men are. They just are, right? Women know how to work with people better than men do. And that when it comes to, you know, memorizing facts and getting up and impressing other people with how we know the facts, maybe men are good at that. When it comes to being there for other people and holding up people and paying attention and making sure that no one gets left out, and women are just better at that than men are. We can learn from women about how to do that. And so I think when Marx said you can judge a revolutionary movement's quality by the participation of women, he was right, and that we should learn from our women comrades how to kind of overcome the niche male behaviors that sometimes hold back our movement, right? And as we struggle to not be a niche internet movement, but to rather be a real movement in real communities, I think we will attract a lot more women, and we should learn from the women we already have about how to do that. So thank you for those remarks, Bree. The other thing I wanted to speak to is that when you talked about the infrastructure and you talked about the financial looting, our book, What is Innovationism? It's the book that was written to be kind of the handbook to give to every new person, what is CPI all about? And in that book, we make the point that we argue that there are 4 stages of the capitalist economic mode of production, not 3. Traditional Marxism says there's primitive accumulation, there's industrial capitalism, then there's imperialism. We argue that imperialism has now entered a 4th stage. And the defining aspect of that 4th stage is the collapse of the Western countries from within. Imperialism, Lenin was observing that finance capital became dominant over industrial capital, and that the Western countries were building themselves up and making themselves more solid from within while exploiting and holding back and underdeveloping the third world. Well, we would argue that we're now in a new phase where this international financial oligarchy that Lenin described is now also looting the first world, and that instead of building up an aristocracy of labor to make the homeland more stable, it's actually doing the opposite, and the imperialist countries are eating themselves from within. And that this is a thesis. We talk about different aspects of this, but accumulation through destruction is the name of the new period. I did not invent that. The person who did probably doesn't want credit for it. That's fine. It's not something that I discovered on my own. It's something that many people have pointed to, but we're in a stage where the imperialist financial monopolies are literally cannibalizing the homelands and primarily extracting profit not through the production of anything productive and creating and increasing the wealth of society, but by profiting off of and vulturing off of the destructive elements of imperialism and decay. And that's why the Western countries, when you talk about infrastructure, to have a strong economy, you got to have roads. The people who own stores can't make money if there's not roads for people to drive on to get to their stores. You know, and restaurants, they can't have a nice restaurant if there's not, you know, if there's not water coming out of the drinking fountains and coming out of the water system to maintain their restaurant. And that all these things have gotten neglected as the imperialist system internally just becomes more and more cannibalistic, eating itself alive to keep itself going. And with that understanding, we can position ourselves as the lovers of the homeland, as the lovers of America, battling against that financial oligarchy to build up the homeland. And that gives us an opportunity to kind of completely reorient ourselves in how to look at the struggle against imperialism. Like it was put by Keith, we want to free America from the American empire. And that's a new approach, and it's exciting. It's an exciting approach, but it requires us to go out and innovate, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we're doing great stuff here. Yeah. So tomorrow night, I will probably talk a lot about Angola. You know, I have an article. There's an article that's up on the CPI website already. Yeah, but yeah, we're just going to keep doing this. CPI is moving ahead. Wednesday, we have our recruiting meeting that we do every week, our recruiting check-in. So it'll probably be starting later than usual tomorrow night. But all is good. Yeah, I didn't get shot by stray bullets last night when I went to cover the shooting. It's always a blessing, right? You got to count your blessings, always be happy about everything, and always celebrate any breakthroughs. And yeah, we just got to keep doing our work and keep being proud of what we do. And we are building our anti-imperialist movement bit by bit. Free America from itself. Amen to that. Amen to that. All right, folks. Well, I guess we'll probably end tonight's stream here. I will put on the closing music. I'll be back tomorrow night. It'll be later than usual, probably like 10:30 or so because of the recruiting CPI meeting. And but yeah, we're just going to keep, the show must go on, and anti-imperialism is always in ascendancy. Dare to struggle, dare to win. We are winning. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.